The doors slammed shut behind me before I even understood where I was standing. 1 second I was chasing a hallway sign that promised a washroom. The next second, cold metal doors sealed with a hiss, and I found myself facing a room full of towering figures who all turned their heads toward me at once. My heart slammed against my ribs. Every single one of them had skin that glowed faintly, like moonlight trapped under glass, and every single one of them was staring at me like I had just crashed a funeral. I was Daniel Whitfield, cargo technician on a rented hauler called the Iron Gull, and nothing about my life had prepared me for this moment. I had grease under my fingernails and a half-eaten protein bar in my pocket. I did not belong here, yet here I was, standing in the middle of a throne room, built from black stone, that seemed to drink the light instead of reflect it. At the far end of the hall sat a figure on a raised platform, taller than anyone else in the room, with skin the color of deep violet dusk and eyes that shimmered like liquid silver. She did not blink, she did not move. She simply watched me, the way a predator watches something unexpected wander into its territory. I had heard rumors about her before my ship ever docked at this outpost. Everyone in this sector spoke about Queen Alira Ven Thessaly of the Threnar Dominion in hushed voices, some with fear, some with longing, most with a strange mixture of both. She ruled fleets that stretched across a dozen systems, and she had turned away every single suitor who ever approached her throne, no matter how powerful or wealthy they were. I had wandered straight into the middle of one of those meetings. Rows of nobles knelt on either side of the hall, dressed in robes stitched with threads that caught the light like liquid metal. Every one of them had traveled from distant corners of known space, hoping to win her hand, her throne, her armies. And every single one of them turned to glare at me, the outsider who had just stumbled into their sacred ceremony without permission. A guard stepped forward, his hand resting on a weapon at his side, his expression sharp enough to cut glass. Before he could speak, the queen raised one hand, and the entire hall fell into silence so complete, I could hear my own pulse hammering in my ears. "Explain yourself," she said, her voice carrying a strange resonance that made the air itself seem to vibrate. I opened my mouth, and for a moment, nothing came out except a nervous laugh. "I was looking for a washroom," I said. "Wrong door, I think." I did not mean to interrupt anything. A ripple moved through the kneeling nobles, whispers hissing between them like static. Some of their faces twisted with disgust, others with amusement, but none of them looked away. The queen tilted her head slightly, studying me the way someone studies a puzzle piece that does not belong to the picture in front of them. "You did not kneel," she said. "I did not know I was supposed to," I answered honestly. "Also, my knees are not great. Years of crawling through engine housings will do that to a person." Silence again. Then something strange happened. The queen's expression shifted, not into anger, but into something closer to curiosity. Her skin, which had been glowing a steady violet, flickered brighter for just a moment, before settling again. "Every being in this hall has offered me fortunes," she said. "Fleets, territories, rare minerals capable of powering entire cities for a century. Tell me, human, what have you brought to offer me?" I glanced around at the nobles, at their gleaming robes and polished weapons, and I felt smaller than I had ever felt in my life. "Nothing," I admitted. "I do not have anything to offer. I just want to find a washroom and get back to fixing a coolant leak on my ship before it floods the lower deck." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then the queen rose from her throne, and the sound of her robes shifting against the stone floor echoed through the silent hall like a slow drumbeat. "That is the most honest answer I have received in 11 years, she said. A noble near the front, dressed in gold-trimmed armor, rose halfway to his feet in protest. "Your Majesty, this creature is nothing more than a common laborer. He does not belong in this ceremony." The queen's gaze shifted toward him, and whatever warmth had been building in her expression vanished instantly. "Sit down, Lord Cassian," she said, her voice flat and final. "You have spoken more about your bloodline in the past hour than you have spoken about anything resembling genuine feeling. I have listened to 11 suitors today alone recite lists of their holdings, as though I am a prize to be calculated, rather than a person to be understood." Cassian sank back down, his jaw tight, his glow dimming with what I assumed was embarrassment or anger, possibly both. The Queen stepped down from her platform, moving with a grace that seemed almost impossible for someone so tall. Every eye in the room followed her as she crossed the space between us, her presence filling the hall the way a rising tide fills an empty shore. "Walk with me," she said, extending one long hand toward me. I stared at her hand, then at the sea of stunned faces surrounding us, then back at her hand again. My instincts screamed at me to run, to apologize, to do anything except take the hand of an alien queen in front of an audience of powerful nobles who clearly wanted to see me disappear. But something in her eyes held a question that felt bigger than the room we stood in, bigger than the politics swirling around us, and I found myself reaching out and placing my hand in hers. Gasps rippled through the hall. Somewhere behind me, I heard a noble mutter something in a language I did not understand, but the tone made the meaning clear enough. We walked together toward a side corridor, leaving behind a throne room full of suitors who had spent years preparing speeches, gifts, and alliances, none of which had earned them what a lost cargo technician had stumbled into by accident. "You do not fear me," she said, once we were alone in the corridor, the noise of the hall fading behind heavy doors. "I am terrified," I admitted. "I just did not think running would help." She let out a sound that was not quite a laugh, but carried the same warmth, a low hum that seemed to come from somewhere deep in her chest. "Running rarely does," she said. "Though most who enter my presence choose to kneel instead, hoping obedience will win favor where honesty might fail them." "I did not know kneeling was an option," I said. "I was mostly focused on not tripping over my own boots." We continued walking through corridors lined with tall windows that looked out over a landscape unlike anything I had seen before. Mountains that shimmered faintly under twin moons, rivers that glowed a soft blue in the darkness. The beauty of it all nearly made me forget the danger I might still be standing in. "Tell me about your ship," she said suddenly, catching me off guard. "It is old," I said, "held together with patchwork repairs and stubbornness. The coolant system fails at least once a month, and the navigation array has a habit of freezing whenever we cross a certain type of magnetic field. It is not much to look at. And yet you speak of it fondly," she said. "It is mine," I said. "Well, mine and my crew's. We fixed it up ourselves over the years. There is something satisfying about keeping something running when everyone else expects it to fall apart." She studied me for a long moment, her silver eyes catching the light from the windows. "Every suitor who has entered my throne room speaks of empires, fleets, and conquests," she said. "You speak of a coolant leak and a stubborn ship. I find myself far more interested in the second conversation." We reached a balcony overlooking the palace gardens, where strange plants with silver leaves swayed gently in a breeze that smelled faintly of citrus and something sweeter I could not identify. The nobles from the throne room had not followed us, though I suspected several of them were watching from somewhere, waiting to see how this unexpected encounter would end. "Why does everyone want to marry you?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop myself. She turned to face me fully, her expression unreadable for a moment, before softening into something almost sad. "Because my throne commands 14 fleets," she said. "Because whoever stands beside me gains influence across systems that took generations to unite. They do not want me. They want what standing beside me represents." "That sounds lonely," I said quietly. Her silver eyes flickered, and for the first time since I had entered her throne room, she looked less like a queen and more like a person carrying a weight she rarely allowed anyone to see. "It has been," she admitted. "For 11 years, I have listened to promises wrapped around ambition, gifts offered as investments rather than gestures of genuine care. I had begun to wonder if anyone would ever speak to me without calculating what they might gain from the conversation. I promise I am not calculating anything," I said. "Mostly, I am wondering if I am about to be executed for accidentally walking into your ceremony." That earned another low hum of amusement from her, the sound rolling through the quiet garden air like distant thunder. "You are safe," she said, "though I suspect my council will have a great deal to say about today's events." We stood together on that balcony for what felt like hours, though I later learned it had only been a matter of minutes. She asked me about my life aboard the Iron Gull, about the friends who made up my crew, about the small repairs and daily struggles that filled my days. I found myself talking more freely than I had in years, forgetting entirely that I was speaking with someone who commanded fleets capable of reshaping star systems. Eventually, a guard approached and informed the queen that the remaining suitors were growing restless, demanding answers about the ceremony's sudden interruption. She sighed, the sound carrying centuries of exhaustion in a single breath. "I suppose I must return," she said, though her tone carried none of the enthusiasm I imagined a queen should feel about returning to a room full of eager suitors. "I should probably find that washroom," I said, attempting a weak joke to ease the tension building in my chest. She smiled, an expression that transformed her entire face, softening the sharp edges of royal composure into something warmer, something almost human despite the obvious differences between us. "Walk with me back to the hall," she said. "I find I am not yet finished with our conversation." As we walked back through the corridors, the nobles' whispered voices grew louder, filled with confusion and barely concealed frustration. When we entered the throne room together, silence fell instantly, every eye locked onto the queen and the cargo technician, walking beside her, as though nothing in the universe could be more natural. "I have made my decision," the queen announced, her voice carrying easily across the stunned hall. "None of you have offered me what I truly desired. Not fleets, not fortunes, not carefully rehearsed declarations of devotion. A stranger who wandered into this hall by accident has given me something none of you managed to offer in 11 years of ceremonies: honesty." The hall erupted into murmurs, nobles exchanging glances of disbelief and outrage. Lord Cassian rose to his feet, his face contorted with anger, but the queen silenced him with a single glance before he could speak a word. "This ceremony is concluded," she said. "You may all return to your homes." As the nobles filed out, their expressions ranging from stunned to furious to quietly amused, I stood beside the queen, still trying to process everything that had happened in the span of a single afternoon. My coolant leak was probably still waiting for me back on the Iron Gull, my crew likely wondering where I had disappeared to, and yet none of that seemed as important as the strange, unexpected conversation I had just shared with someone who ruled 14 fleets, and had somehow found comfort in the company of a lost cargo technician. "What happens now?" I asked once the hall had emptied. She turned to face me, her silver eyes bright with something I could only describe as hope. "Now," she said, "we continue talking, and we see where honesty leads us." I never did find that washroom, but somehow, standing there in that quiet, empty hall beside a queen who had spent 11 years searching for something genuine, I found something far more valuable than I ever expected to discover that day.